We're not officially starting the show. Set reminder.
No.
Okay, cool. Well, look at that. We're on YouTube, guys.
Yeah, but are we on Pornhub?
Okay, cool. Again, we're live, Gary.
Oh.
Anybody can get on there. It's a good platform.
Okay, and we're on Facebook. Okay, so we are officially on Kano, now live on your channel, The Rotation. Wow, this is really cool. Okay, so we're officially on all live broadcasts, right? We're recording the official audio. I guess the podcast version of the show has not started, but the actual live broadcast has started. So,
hey guys.
so you guys know, before we actually officially start the podcast version, I've recorded an audio intro that's really sexy.
Is it snappy?
It's sexy.
Sexy, not snappy.
It starts off somewhere like you know, it's your favorite time of the week. All your job's done.
Time to tune in.
And time to tune into the rotation. And then the jaw meditation, whatever it is in the background. And and then it starts at the right time where you are in the rotation with Suncoast NORML. And I'll have you guys know that I put in there I am your host, Carlos Ramita. I said we are your hosts, your Suncoast NORML executive board.
That's so cumulative.
So Kano is going to join us in a little bit. I guess we should actually start the podcast version of the show. So
is it being streamed live on Facebook to where
we
share it?
We're streamed live on Facebook.
Okay.
And we're streamed live on YouTube as of right now.
Awesome.
So I don't really know how to start the actual show because this is a different way because we actually have the intro kind of cut in at the beginning. So
do you have the song to play on your phone?
I have the video here. I'll play the video.
Does it come with a video?
It doesn't it's just all anybody's gonna see on the live broadcast is just the YouTube thing.
I love you to my heart and soul.
Can't even hear myself.
Okay, I'm just gonna stop that. So what's up, guys?
Excited to be here.
Okay,
how are you guys?
So Yoshi, I'm gonna need you to speak directly into that microphone.
I'm going to speak directly into the microphone. I am excited to be here. Thank you for having
me.
me.
You guys know my name's Carlos. I'm here with Gary Stein, and we have Yomaira, or as most people call her, Yoshi, on the show today. And it's very important to have her on the show because we're starting a new podcast, La Rotación en Español. Right?
And
Bienvenidos.
And I'm going to go ahead and let somebody into the building, but you guys go ahead and talk about it.
All right.
The video again. Okay. Go talk about Spanish rotation.
Yes, it's exciting. Gary, what do you think about the new show coming up?
Are you talking about the Spanish version of the rotation?
Yes, I am.
Or La Rotación?
La Rotación en Español.
En Español.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thrilled because we need to be more inclusionary because the history of cannabis is racist and we need to start changing that narrative.
Well, the thing about it, too, is that there's a whole community that isn't getting the right education, and it's just, right, there's 20 million in Florida, we were saying. So, yeah.
So,
they just,
what are you actually going to call the Spanish version of the rotation? Have you decided yet?
Rotación en Español.
Is it
That seems pretty
rotación
straightforward.
or
Yeah.
la
Yeah.
rotación?
La rotación.
Okay, so and you're going to be basically doing like the Spanish version of the show. It's not going to be
Mhm.
like hosted by me and Gary. It's going to have your own spin on it. But what are your goals for the show?
So my goals for the show are basically to approach the community as if it was one of my family members. For example, my mother, she was one of my biggest critics and didn't really understand what cannabis was about and how it helped you, your body, right, your system. And after I helped her understand and educated her, uh,
We've got some
she
spectators here.
yeah, hey guys. I realized that it was just a lack of knowledge, right? A person can make their own decision, but if they don't have all of the resources there to help them understand or help them formulate and get to the right decision, then it's very difficult. And just like us, we need to know why. We need to understand the endocannabinoid system and how it works with our receptors. And so, yeah,
Well,
that's what I want to help the
that's
community.
okay. So as you all know, I am a Cuban man, a very gringo Cuban man, but I am of Hispanic descent. I have a Cuban mother, and I went through this with them. Well, when I was 16, they were grounding me because they were finding roaches in my dresser drawer and stuff like that, and I'm like,
We're not talking about the bugs, right?
no.
Okay.
We're talking about like Gary, when you smoke a joint and it gets to the end, it's called a roach.
I actually have the history of that name. I'll tell you about that later.
Okay, well, Gary is very good at history, by the way, guys. but and then and I went through this like college career, and then after I graduated, I told my parents who paid for my college that I was going to use my MBA to get into the cannabis industry. And my mom was like, "Oy, mijo, oy." And she spent a lot of time in her room, and I'm very fortunate to have parents that are willing to try to educate themselves. And she had me tell her, there's something I'm missing, please can you educate me. I had her watch documentaries, I printed out studies. Yet it's so ingrained in our culture that drugs are bad that she was still like hesitant. And what it really took was for her to meet like a mother that had Giselle Delgadillo, who has a child that's suffering from a chronic illness
Bruno.
and uses cannabis to treat that child. And when she saw a mother using cannabis, right, and using that out of love for her child, then she understood.
And what I want to also say that your parents really inspired me to want to break through to my mom and my family. So yeah, thank you, Mr. Midas.
Oh, that's so nice. Mommy and Poppy are inspiring people and not even knowing it.
Absolutely, it is an inspiration because they're from Miami, right?
Well,
And
they currently live in Clearwater. The family was from Miami. We kind of all moved away, but my parents are both from Havana, Cuba.
Exactly. And so they migrated here and they ended up starting their own business, and they were this very successful couple that I saw, and I was just like, wow, they went through their whole life, and then they weren't closed off to the idea of cannabis, right? At least when I met them, they were. You did your homework.
I did my work. I did my job.
Which chiseling away at that block of marble. But you broke through to them, and so that really inspired me to say, hey, you know what? I really feel I can break through to my mom, and I had to do it through educating her over and over again, just explaining it different ways. But I finally got.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you, like with my mom, it meant meeting. It took meeting Giselle to kind of break through that barrier. What did it take for your mom?
So she was in a situation where she's a breast cancer survivor. And so they started giving her like a lot of chemo pills and, radiation. And that made her bones really weak and her body really weak, which caused for her to be in a lot of pain. And so what started happening is that they just started giving her like bags of pills, basically. And instinctively, she knew right away, like, this is not normal.
Yeah,
this
this
isn't okay.
isn't
This
gonna
is
work.
my liver is shot, and they're trying to prescribe me all of, like, she had two whole bags of them of prescriptions, and I said,
Better
don't,
living through chemistry, right?
yeah, I was like, don't take that. Let's just try a different alternative and see if it works for you. And we started giving her hemp oil, and it really worked for her. And so now she's a big advocate, and seeing how much happier and how her quality of life has increased because of it makes me really happy. It's like a
That's awesome.
mhm.
Yeah, and so we've been discussing this too, and like we really feel that this podcast is a good way to reach out to the Hispanic community, and how the media doesn't really cover things like cannabis, and like education is really lacking to our Hispanic. How many people in Florida are
20 million.
20 million?
Yeah.
How many people live in Florida? Do you guys know?
120 million.
It's 120 million.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that's a big chunk out of that. That's like, what is it? That's like 30. I don't know math, but it's a big percentage. So, Gary, do you know math and history and politics?
Yes, I do, as a matter of fact. It's a big chunk is what it basically is. But what is interesting about the Hispanic community is it's not solely one community, because you've got at least 20 or 30 different cultures within that. I mean, the Cuban community is different from the Puerto Rican community. By the way, Puerto Ricans are Americans by
Cubans
citizenship.
are different from Colombians.
And even within the Cuban population, we have those who came here before the boat lift and those who came here after the boat lift, and there's different ideas and thoughts and ideologies even within that own population. And those who come from South America, like Ecuadorians and the Guatemaltecs and Nicaraguenses, they all have different cultures that they come back from. And even when we're talking about as far as cannabis is concerned, a lot of what we deal with now came from the mestizos in Mexico during the Spanish Civil War. Were the ones who were fighting against the Euros, who were the people who had more money, and so therefore you had a situation where it was the pobres, and then it was the Euros, and the Euros brought Christian missionaries who were highly against the use of cannabis, whereas the Indians, the mestizos, had it already ingrained into their culture because the Aztec medicine men brought it in as part of that culture, and so it brought that in, and we've had to deal with the fact that the missionaries made it so avoidable that if anybody mentioned the word cannabis, you'd see women genuflecting themselves as soon as they heard the word.
Shoot, I mean, this obviously goes back farther than what I thought, because when I think history of cannabis, I think and the Hispanic community, I think of the racism to make cannabis illegal and whatnot. But this is like hundreds and hundreds of years in the making. Hispanics have apparently had their hands in cannabis for a long time.
And because of the fact that the rich folks were in power, which is one of the reasons that Mexico was the first country to make cannabis illegal.
Really?
People don't realize that, but it was illegal here first, and it happened as a result of the Spanish-American War, the Mexican Civil War. I'm sorry.
Didn't I hear something that Mexico is like going to make cannabis legal soon?
That is correct. They are going to make it legal federally.
So they're going to be like one of the first to make it illegal, one of the first to legalize.
Yes.
Huh.
Now, in regards
pioneers, guys.
I'll make this real quick, but as far as the roach is concerned, the armies of the poor during the Mexican Civil War they basically walked from one battle to the other, and they often had brought their cannabis with them. It would help them get through the long walks and things of that sort. And oftentimes they didn't have any money to have even rolling papers. So what they would do is they would find discarded cigars, and they would use the leaf of the cigar, which was usually only about 1 or 2 inches long, and roll cannabis into it. And it was oval shaped. It was brown. It was about 1 inch or so long. And they called those cucarachas because they looked exactly like cockroaches. And so therefore that got reduced to the word reduced to the word roach as it spread through California in the 1960s.
So wait, so a roach isn't the end of a joint?
It is. It's a very small joint.
Okay.
That's what it came down to. If you remember the traditional song,
I was thinking cigarillos.
Yep.
I can't walk without my cannabis. That's basically what they were saying at that point in time.
Oh, that's
Whoa.
interesting. That's a crazy spin. I never knew
Whoa.
that.
These things kind of
Huh.
get lost in the fog of time, but you do some research and you find these things out.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And-
See?
And Yoshi, are you familiar with how marijuana is racist?
No.
The plant itself is not, but the reaction to it is.
No, we're talking about the actual
The
word.
actual word, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and Gary's gonna come in and completely, say what
I usually do,
I'm
yeah.
screwing up on here. But so when cannabis was made illegal, right? There was a smear campaign about it, and the whole reefer madness thing and everything like that. And when during this time, those smear campaigns and a lot of the lawmakers that were making the laws to make cannabis illegal would purposely use the term marijuana in order to kind of associate cannabis with the Hispanic community, and also add to fear to cannabis due to the immense amount of racism towards Hispanics at that time.
Wow, that I think I've heard of that before in like a documentary, but that's interesting, right? How they want to just label or herd like here this is their category. And
Look at that. It looks like Kano's trying to pop in here. His screen's all black. Let's go ahead and share his screen.
Hi Kano.
Yeah, our director, by the way, is in the Washington, D.C. area right now, though apparently he was in Niagara Falls this last week. I thought maybe he got deported to Canada or something.
I don't know what's going on there. I think as soon as his stream starts working, he'll just pop in. But yeah, so anyways, let's keep talking about racist marijuana, guys.
You could actually look at transcripts of state and federal legislators that were actually talking in such racist terms on the floor of their Congress or the floor of their state representatives. In Colorado, the situation where they had a lot of migrant workers coming up from Mexico, the Civil War, and they were getting agricultural jobs. And of course, the same thing we hear now is that they're coming to take our jobs. Which, even though Americans were not using those jobs, and so it was very easy for them to get involved.
Hi, Kano. We can hear you if you speak.
I had a particular state senator in Colorado who said that
you got some noise in the background there.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know. I guess it's not really. It was just like some sort of feedback or something.
Okay.
But hey, everybody, we got Chris Kano, our executive director, now joining us in the live stream.
Woo!
Hey, everybody. Glad to be in rotation.
I have a habit of putting Kano into the live stream when his hair is messed up.
It looks great. It looks great.
So
having hair helps. So,
Kano, to catch you up on everything that's going on. As you know, Yoshi's going to be starting the Spanish version of our show, The Rotation. La rotación
En español.
en español.
Amigos,
And
yes.
with this long running debate that me and Keno have about cannabis and marijuana, we're just talking about that, and Gary's dropping some history knowledge on us at the moment.
Yep.
Absolutely. I was mentioning the fact that a Colorado senator, I think it was 1920, when they were working on possibly having a state law that made cannabis illegal in Colorado, was talking about the fact that some of these Hispanics, they get a couple of rares of the stuff, as they called it, and all of a sudden they think they're king of Europe and they're getting ready to assassinate all of their political enemies. In which case, it went back to the fake news of Mexico was that cannabis made you a violent criminal,
Right.
and that actually carried over there, so that the Mexican aristocracy could villainize the Hispanics coming over to this country to get work.
But Gary, okay, so coming back to modern times or contemporary times, whatever you want to call it, right? Now, using the word cannabis and using the word marijuana today, I personally think it's important that we use the word marijuana in just normal speech, just kind of to as acceptance towards Hispanic culture. But right, as far as using it in laws, using the term marijuana in American lawmaking is completely racist and trying to kind of like I'm wrong word here, vilify or something like that.
Yeah, well, that is correct, because basically legislators in 1937 used the word marijuana instead, or marijuana, instead of cannabis, because they wanted to separate it from the medicine which was in the pharmacopoeia at that time as cannabis sativa. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people knew the medicine to be cannabis, but this thing called marijuana was being brought over by the illegal aliens coming up from Mexico to take all of our jobs, was obviously an evil substance because those were evil people. And so therefore they vilified it that way in order to make it illegal here in the United States. And that's why it had a racist history. Now, 2020, things are different, but the fact is the medical term, the scientific term cannabis, should be the one that's being used in things like laws and that kind of situation to make certain that we keep things unified. I mean, if you actually go and do a search of laws in the United States and you use the keyword cannabis and the word marijuana, you'll find two separate sets of laws, and it should be the same law. But the fact is they had some laws that use the word cannabis because they want to lean towards a more medical, scientific approach, and the other ones that use marijuana, in some case, it was a dog whistle rule to try to keep that bill from actually going forward. Right. They actually used it as a poison pill.
Right, like almost like a trigger words in a sense, right? Or, but I like how you're saying using the word marijuana more, because that way, whatever experience is linked to that word for the public, we can maybe start changing that, right? Through advocacy and
so I want to kind of ask Keno here, we're talking about what word to use at what time when referring to cannabis or marijuana. We've got an English version of the podcast, we got a Spanish version of the podcast. Keno, what words should we use in each version of the podcast?
I think a lot of times, as you said, it depends on the subject, and that these words have been used interchangeably for years. I mean, if we're writing legislation, which we're not doing, we're talking about it. I think in that sense, marijuana is a commonly used word. I mean, it's in our organization's a name. We're the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, and so that being said, it requires us to use it interchangeably until that other word can be, until marijuana can be let go by the wayside, until cannabis becomes the mainstream in the lexicon again. So, the fact that we can even acknowledge that it's a word that has been used to discriminate against the Latino community for being cannabis users, that it's been used, as a weapon in its criminalization against the African American community, that has been used to vilify immigrant communities. It is all history that needs to be discussed. And so when people hear the word marijuana, they know they know the history behind it. And so, I have no problem of us using it interchangeably in our podcast in both English and Spanish. As you said, Carlos, it's a matter of which arena are you actually utilizing it in. In an arena of law, we want to utilize science, reason, and facts. And the fact is that marijuana was used as a racist word to vilify cannabis.
Yeah, and having both podcasts and whatnot, like I definitely think like they can be used interchangeably or whatnot. But as a Cuban person on a cannabis podcast, I kind of feel the need to use the word marijuana, not just when we do the Spanish version, but even in the English version of the show, just because I want to promote my culture. I don't know.
Now, you should know if we do use the word cannabis, and I hate to use this other term because it's kind of been used a lot more too much recently, is that we don't use the word cannabis as a means of cancel culture, right? We're not trying to disassociate ourselves with the history. The history is there. It will always be there. It just in 2020, if you're talking about legal language, it should be cannabis. And I try to use the word cannabis more than marijuana because of the fact that I do a lot of legislation, because I do work with legislators, and I am trying to get them to maintain this as a scientific product that actually has medical value. Whereas marijuana, it also comes to that word recreational, which we actually started in California in the 1990s for what we call responsible adult use. Because the word recreational actually has negative connotations to it, that somebody is using it. By the way, opium heroin use is called recreational as well. But the whole idea is that anybody who's recreational is not professional, because that's the exact opposite of the word recreational. Is marijuana is professional? It's not medical. So a person who is recreational is a person who doesn't want to work. They have dreadlocks. They're lying on the beach smoking spliffs. We need to get ourselves away from those negative stereotypes that have been actually thrust in there to cause more damage than move things forward.
That's that link with the word and the situation, right? That they had. They're kind of bringing that baggage in, but we want to.
Yeah, it was a word they started using in California, but in actuality, I believe it was actually slipped in there to prevent full legalization, to cause more pushback against it.
Right.
And you'll see that in a lot of instances. So if you hear us using the word adult use or responsible adult use as opposed to recreational, it's because of that fact. Although recreational now is becoming normalized as a word, so there's kind of pushback there because everybody knows what rec is, so in a lot of instances. And we have to understand what the history of the word recreational has to do with how legislation move forward. So
yeah,
we have those issues.
It is very important. We have a responsibility as activists to use the right terminology, and I think it's funny because I remember Keno saying that marijuana is in our name. We're the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, and we would do some events, and I would see Keno up on stage, and he would say something like legalize marijuana and expect like a good result from the crowd. And then somebody in the back would be like, say cannabis. And we'd be like, but we're NORML. We're a National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws.
I guess if you change it to cannabis, it would be narcal, and people don't actually like that word.
Did you try to get National to change it to that once?
Keith Stroop actually told me they would never change it because nobody likes the sound of narcal.
Where did the word cannabis originate from?
Pardon?
Cannabis.
Where's the word come from?
Yeah.
Actually, it comes from the Babylonian, for a cane of two natures, cannabis, which means, cane, beast of two natures. And for that reason, it was used in the nomenclature in the 1600s when it was originally designated as cannabis sativa, to use the Babylonian word and move it forward.
So that's some real history right there with the cannabis way back.
I mean, it's had so many names of it. I mean, the Chinese 2,000 years ago just called it ma, which I think is a very proud sounding word, don't you think?
Didn't the word canvas come from cannabis?
Yes, in fact, it's actually from the Gaelic. If you look at the etymology, and it means cloth from cannabis.
And it now means all cloth because of how much cloth was made from cannabis. It
made the best sails ever, what they used to call raven's cloth.
It
was a very, very thick cloth made from hemp fibers that had a sail which did not rot on the trip from Europe to the United States.
We keep pushing Gary as like the history expert, but when I met Keno, I met him while he was teaching a history class for cannabis at Medical Marijuana in Tampa.
Nice.
I had a very similar situation. Yes.
Yeah, I'm definitely an all things cannabis junkie. So definitely, enjoy learning about the history because this plant has such a unique and intricate history throughout multiple cultures on Earth. Like Gary touched on, it's been used in China for thousands of years, and China is a prime example of a country we can look at that has been around for thousands of years, unlike the United States, where we've been around less than 250. And throughout its history, there were times where it was prohibited in ancient China. That there were hundreds of years where, if you look over a country that has several thousand years of history, and you can see different time periods of different rulers, different regimes, different cultural attitudes towards the plant. And part of it is that it is a mind. Not mind altering. It is a mind expanding plant. It is a conscious altering plant in that you have an altered state of perception when you utilize cannabis, and that altered perception oftentimes helps you. In the words of the comedian Cat Williams, just say frack it all.
We're a podcast now. We can say fuck it.
Oh, I didn't know if there were certain restrictions on other streaming platforms that we broadcast. But
Cat Williams tends to get bleeped a lot.
Cover your ears.
I hit the adults only tab when I
awesome. Well, yeah, definitely. When you hit that first hit, it does help take stress away. It helps put in perspective what's important, and that is not something that the powers that be necessarily want. When the powers that be want people to conform, utilizing the plant, it helps you realize that conformity to tab certain practices, certain laws, certain leaders is just bullshit, and you smoke it and you say fuck it. That's probably the worst thing for regimes that want nice what's the word compliant workers. And that's really what this boils down to. I mean, this has been a poor man's drug, if you will, for so many centuries. It is cheap. It is easy to grow in your backyard. It is something that doesn't require. When I often think about drugs, I don't even think about cannabis. Drugs to me is something you gotta process and put into a paste and add baking soda to. I don't know the rest.
Yeah. And it goes in. I'm happy you said that, Kano, because we were talking about medical use and adult use and recreational and all that. And I mean, just being able, one thing that 2020 has definitely taught me is that being able to say fuck it is medical. There is a lot of medical value in being able to say fuck it, because it's been a stressful last year. And yeah, I think a lot of people with quarantine couldn't go through quarantine without cannabis right now.
Mm-hmm.
And while we're on the subject of words, to what Gary was saying about recreational versus adult use, to me, the distinction is more of a prescription versus over the counter. And we in the Western world make that distinction all the time. Something that requires a prescription to go versus something that is so commonly used that you can just get it over the counter. And to me, that is what adult use of cannabis is. It is not having to spend $150 to $300 to go to a doctor for a recommendation. It's just to be able to walk into a dispensary and get it over the counter as a commonly utilized product.
Yeah, and when I went ahead and I testified in front of the financial committee over in Tallahassee this last year, when they asked for information on regards to how the ballot initiatives, as in Regulate Florida and Make It Legal Florida, will impact the population, I mentioned the fact that there are so many people who need this medically but don't want to have their names on that registry, even for access to police or to anybody else, because number one, they're worried that use might go beyond that point. And so therefore, a lot of people say if they have to get a registration card, they'll go to the black market. And that, in this day and age, is actually a dangerous move, because the black market is not regulated.
No.
They don't care what is in it, because they don't have to have customer satisfaction to keep on selling their product.
Right,
Well,
and that's the future.
Go ahead, Yoshi. I'm sorry.
I know there's crazy stuff happening right now in the cannabis industry, in the black market, with just spraying the flower, and it's insane. And yeah, we want to know what we're consuming, and we have that right.
And this last year, as you remember, they had a lot of cartridges that came out in the black market that were basically buying counterfeit vape cartridges from China, and they had packaging that looked exactly like old California packaging. It still had Prop 215 on it, and there were products in there that were using tocopherol D, which is a form of vitamin E in an oil form, that was put in there as a stabilizer to make it thicker, so they could cut the THC and make the product thicker and make the cartridges look like they're more impressive. And people were having this vape-induced lung disease.
But
because they don't have any need to follow up on their patients to make certain they're okay.
But
they just sell it and they run.
Here's the thing too, is that I see a lot of people in Florida that are willing to take that risk and go to the black market solely because, first off, well, not solely, but for two reasons. You can't hear us in your headphones. So for a couple of reasons, right? First off, right, they don't have the money. Second, right, they don't want to support the corrupt system that Florida has put in place. That they'd rather go ahead and support the trap house than the cannabis system that's in place here in Florida that's so restrictive.
It is, and it's been a shame because large groups of people have been cut out of the business and created certain millionaire businesses that are doing quite well in a vertical system, which is very hard to do. If you can be successful in a vertical business, more power to you, because it takes so much manpower and it takes so much money. And that was one of the reasons we didn't have any minority-owned businesses here in the state of Florida, and we are getting one, but not in the way you would think. It was not through a competitive process to obtain a license through an application, but one of those licenses that was given to an organization that actually failed in their application attempt back in 2015, King Tree Farms, was sold to a company called Cookies out of California, which is a minority-based business. And they are coming to here as Florida Cookies, and they'll be the first minority-owned business. So more power to them. I didn't expect it to happen through what they call M&A, or mergers and acquisitions, but so be it. Let's let them move forward.
Well, on this note, Gary, about the black market doesn't have any incentive to take care of its patients. What I've seen in the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area in the DMV is this gray market that they've created where, you don't actually purchase cannabis, you purchase a different commodity, and then the cannabis is donated. And in these gray markets, what we're seeing is actual entrepreneurship of black market vendors, working to become legitimate brands and labels. And it's interesting that competition spurs a need to want to have quality and to produce quality products. And in many times, the existing government infrastructures that we have are also failing to regulate the legal markets in a way to protect people, as you said, from, for example, subpar vape pens coming out of China. And so I want to say to all the listeners out there, to all of our members, if you have an issue with something that's happening in either the legal market or the black market, we want you to be able to come to us and let us know. Our job is to advocate for you. Our job is to push the will of the people forward. And with that being said, we need to hear that from you, because oftentimes, like you said, folks are going to be too scared to go to the government for any reason at all. What are you going to do? You're going to call the police and tell them you got bad weed? In that situation, and so there's definitely a concern that folks have. They need a place to go. They need somewhere to tell people what's going on. And so we definitely want folks to come to us. I mean, what I find very necessary for us to do moving forward is to make sure that we can both be the advocacy organization people need to reform things in the state house, in the U.S. House of Representatives and Congress and such, but we also need to be there to help hold the industry accountable, to be that Better Business Bureau of cannabis, as you will. For lack of a proper metaphor, in order for folks for us to understand what's going on, because the legal industry takes shortcuts too. I mean, we've seen photos leaked on the internet of different sites, grow sites with mold pesticides from legal operators in Florida. So there's definitely a concern as to quality that folks are getting. And as you said before, there is a corruption among the bureaucracy in how the OMMU dished out licenses. So why would we assume that their quality controls are up to par as well?
Well, that's interesting you mentioned that, because one thing about the regulated market is if there is a problem, if there is mold in the grow, if they do have powdery mildew that's hollowing out all the buds, you do have a path to work within the regulated area to get that problem remediated. Because that way people know they have to destroy their crop and they have to buy it from another MMTC. I know that AltMed Move has sold several huge crops, as I'm talking about tons, to some of the other MMTCs whose crops have failed because of mold, and that's because there is a regulatory structure in place. If you have to be self-regulated, that in the issue does where it comes down to how much does this grower care about the end user. And in some cases, they do care a heck of a lot. In California, I know several people who have had huge grows, and they grew specifically for the adult use market because they waited so long to get their adult use license to be able to sell that product to dispensaries in order to put it into products. They were going broke, paying for the rent and all their workers and things of that sort. So they ended up having to sell their product on the black market in order to stay alive until they finally get that license. So these people who are reputable, who care about their product, who put all their heart and soul into the product, is to make sure they get the best product, both as far as efficacy and safety is concerned, but they're being forced into the black market. And that happens too. That's why over-regulation is just as bad as no regulation.
Mm-hmm. Well, guys, it's 11:06. It looks like we're 30 minutes into the show, and it looks like it's time to wrap it up.
So when is the Spanish version going to come into rotation?
Let me check the calendar here.
Nowadays, calendars are officially on phones.
And while Yoshi's checking her calendar, I'm just going to go ahead and say I think we did a pretty good job of covering all of Spanish avenues and cannabis and marijuana. We've gone through the entire history. We've even up to the first minority dispensary in Florida and the introduction of La Rotación.
En español.
Domingos a 10.
And on that note, team, we were talking about what words to use. What I don't want us to do is also get into a just certain mindset, understanding that the Spanish-speaking world is so diverse. There are so many countries in the Spanish-speaking world, so many unique cultures. Different places even use different terminology. We're arguing over cannabis and marijuana, but if you go to certain places, they may use yerba, they may use mota.
I love mota.
They might call it pito, So there are so many different slang terms, street words, common lexicons across the Spanish-speaking world. I think it's important for us to definitely recognize that diversity and help people make that connection to what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Hispanic community definitely is yearning for it, right? They want to know. They hear it all over the radio, the news. Marijuana here, marijuana talk everywhere, but they don't really have a resource that's going to help them understand why it benefits you and how it benefits you, right? Like the science behind it. And so it'll be interesting. I'm excited to be able to offer that to the community.
So did you find the release date there on your calendar?
How about this weekend on Sunday? So we've got the 30th.
Here's the way this show schedule goes.
27th,
right, Yoshi? We record on Sundays and then we release on Monday.
Okay.
So the live broadcasts all go out on social media on Sunday, and then we actually post the podcast onto our feed on Monday.
So if you're in church, you'll still be able to hear it afterwards.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, as long as you follow us on one of our social media platforms. Pretty soon we'll get it up on Twitter. I think we're gonna have to start a new Twitter account, guys. But
Gary, now that you mention church,
Gracias.
I don't know if this is blasphemous
Dios
or not,
mío.
but there's a lost story
Gracias
of
de Dios.
Jesus
Yeah.
supposedly actually using cannabis oil to cure people. Have you heard of it?
it's
Oh,
called
absolutely.
Mota oil.
Isn't that insane? It was like, I guess, a combination of marijuana extract, cinnamon, myrrh, and
You talk about the holy anointment oil that they soaked Aaron with before he went into the tabernacle to keep him from burning by revelation.
how about the twist? The twist of it having cannabis in it.
There's a lot of belief that and not to go into my stance on religion and everything, But and I'm not arguing with anybody's beliefs. Please, Christians,
making it clear, making it
I'm
clear.
sure you're right about Jesus, but there is an alternative theory that instead of being the Son of God, that he was just a healer that would use plant medicines in order to heal the sick.
And that makes a lot of sense.
And
I like it when it makes
and
sense.
back then, cannabis was in, as Gary was speaking of, the
Babylonian.
he was speaking of there was a lot of holy anointing oils back in ancient Jewish times or whatever.
Yeah, the high priest had to get soaked with it.
Yeah, so
which was obviously a good buzz, I would
the
think.
idea that was that cannabis would use these oils on sick people, and maybe didn't know that it was the cannabis that was helping things, but that oil would then heal the sick.
Well, Pliny the Elder, we're not going to get too heavily into this, of course, because we have to close out. But Pliny the Elder, who did a lot of the historical references to medicine, both in regards to the Roman times and alluded to the Greek times, noted the fact that the Romans were heavily into using cannabis as medicine, and that whenever they had somebody who was injured in battle, they would pack the wound with cannabis leaves, and it actually helped the wounds heal better because it reduced the inflammation. They didn't understand exactly the mechanism of it, but they knew that it worked. It's one of those things, I don't know this for a fact, but I know that it works, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that the Romans used cannabis so widely was the reason why the Christians moved to the sacrament of wine instead of cannabis, because they really hated the Romans for some reason.
For some reason. So Yoshi, I have a question for you. We're going to close out on this question.
All right.
All right. So we've gone through all the history and everything. You've had this great education on cannabis and Spanish community. You're starting this Spanish podcast. What are you going to use? You're going to say cannabis. You're going to say marijuana. You're going to say mota. You're going to say yerba. What are you going to promote?
I think that I'm going to feel the crowd, right? Because I want to be able to speak their language, right? I don't want to confuse them, and you'll get that from the community too, because for example, with my mother, I had to explain to her what hemp was because she doesn't want to use marijuana. So I had to be very careful of not using the word marijuana around her, because it would instantly put up walls and say no. And so I had to use a different approach. So I think it's just understanding the crowd really, and then using the words that are appropriate for their understanding.
Well, then let's have an unscientific poll. For those guys who are watching this on YouTube or on Facebook, feel free to go into the comments and mention what your ethnicity is, and possibly your country of origin, and let us know what word feels most comfortable to you. We'd like to know.
Please, yes.
That sounds good. That sounds nice. Okay, guys, that's the rotation for this week. I think we're going to close off. So everybody say bye.